All right. So,
Mr. Lugosi.
thank
welcome.
you. Thank you. Be well. Take care. Be well. Dude, I'm really happy that you made us watch Glen or Glenda the other night because I watched Ed Wood now maybe 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, and it's not fresh in my mind like it was a couple weeks ago. So I'm happy that we got to watch, that's his first film?
Yeah, it's his first film.
Yeah.
Want to know actually, Glen or Glenda is like the film in his filmography that's considered like one of the worst films of all time. But I feel like you can figure this out if you think a little bit. Which filmmaker has it as one of his favorite films of all time?
Think for a little bit. Who would say that was one of their favorite films?
Come on, you know it.
It's not like one of my favorite filmmakers.
No.
All right. So you know exactly where I'm going with my train of thought. No.
Like it makes sense when you think about when you try to piece together who this could be. It makes sense that they would say this is one of their favorite films.
Weird director? Can you give me a hint on genre or longevity? Like how long have they been a public figure?
For a while, I think since the 80s.
Almodovar?
Mm-mm.
That was a pretty good guess.
That was a good guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Not to say that Almodovar is weird, but Almodovar
He's
enjoys.
Different.
Yeah, his cinema is the definition of queer cinema, and we can get into this one a little bit. I mean, we're actually here talking about Ed Wood, but we can get into Glen or Glenda, and I feel like that is also just before its time as far as queer cinema. It's quite impressive. But no, okay, let me think.
One more guess.
One more guess. All right, not Almodovar. Is he American?
Yeah.
Is he? What genre does he do?
I guess it's a cross. He does a lot of sci-fi and mystery.
David Lynch.
Yep.
Yeah.
David Lynch.
Does
that make sense?
That does.
That would be one of his favorite films.
What did he say made him like it so much?
I don't know. I just saw a sentence when I was looking up the film. David Lynch cites this as one of his favorite films of all time.
I'm curious what would be the scene that did it for him. Probably the Bela Lugosi shit.
Yeah.
Because you know what the Bela Lugosi shit actually reminds me of? Have you seen David Lynch movies? What have you seen from him?
I actually might not have seen anything by him.
Really?
Yeah.
So you just know him as a public figure. You don't even know him as a director. Mm-hmm. You should watch Mulholland Drive. That might be the first one I ever saw of him. And I quote that as the scariest non-scary horror movie ever. There's another movie that did that too, but I'm blanking. I've used that for a couple films, but specifically Mulholland Drive is a very scary non-horror movie. And there is a scene where a guy is talking about a blue box or something in this weird old theater. And now that I think about it, it's almost identical to Bela Lugosi's random speeches in Glen or Glenda.
Green dragon.
Pull the string.
Dog tails.
Pull the string. That's
snails.
I kind of want to get a Bela Lugosi
t-shirt.
No, tattoo. More permanent.
Just his face on your back, like DMX with his pit bull on his back.
I think.
R.I.P. To both.
Pitbull died?
No. DMX he had a tattoo of his pit bull Spike on his back.
I was damn, I didn't know you're a huge Pitbull fan.
Yeah, I've been a day one.
Maybe we should address this right now as well. If you're seeing this in black and white and we sound like old news radio telecasters, is that the right word? Telecasters?
Yeah, that sounds right.
I feel like
My first word is teleprompter, but that is a device.
I feel like telecaster is video. Whatever. If we sound like we're on the radio, then that's because we did it intentionally because of Ed Wood and his films, and also
the Ed Wood biopic that we're here to talk about
by Tim Burton,
which is done in black and white.
I've heard our podcast get referenced as the Ed Wood of podcasts
because it's so nuanced.
Yeah, because we do one take and then just put it out there.
It's perfect.
Yeah, because it's real life. Because we're dealing with the elements. Now, I think, I asked you this question before we saw Glen or Glenda. But I asked you this question, I thought to myself, if you watch something like Citizen Kane. We recognize that as a a historical masterpiece because we are told it's a historical masterpiece. I'm sure you could find people today that still love it, like actually genuinely love it. But I remember watching that for the first time and thinking like, okay, I can see why this was really a big deal. Like it invented different techniques of filmmaking, and it's considered to be like the greatest movie of all time. But it's certainly not the movie that I enjoyed the most. Mm-hmm. And honestly, if someone told me instead that it was a piece of shit, like I probably would have believed that too. I
actually haven't met a single person who raved about it to me. They've either said it's boring or they didn't get what was so great about it.
Yeah, so my point is like, basically, if I wasn't told about that movie, then I probably would think it's terrible. So, Are we influenced to think Ed Wood films are bad because we're told they're bad? And instead, if we were told by a film critic how amazing they were and historically important they were, we would actually consider them different? That was the question I asked you. And then I saw Glen or Glenda. And I was like, no, it's just truly not good.
That's just why I wanted to watch some of those films before we recorded this podcast, because I wanted to see that. Like, I've only heard about it. Like, for our listeners / viewers, the only reason I know really of this film and know of Ed Wood is because, like, when I was in high school, one day, like, my dad asked me if I could rip Plan 9 from Outer Space from YouTube and burn it on a blank DVD copy, or a blank DVD, like, disc for him so he could watch it later, which is such a early 2000s, like 2010, like, thing to do.
Oh yeah, I remember my dad used to do that a lot.
But, so I had no idea what the hell he was talking about. Like, I thought he was speaking gibberish, and then he told me all about like Ed Wood and how he's just like this, like the worst filmmaker of all time, and like his sets are so cheap. They use like terrible, like effects, not even effects. Like in Plan 9, like when you see a UFO flying around, it's literally like someone holding a toy like UFO on a string, and like poorly cropping it into the background of like stock footage of like New York City. So that's always been like burned in my mind. Then he told me that Tim Burton and Johnny Depp made a biopic about Ed Wood, and that's really good. So I've always had that in the back of my mind. I never thought about like watching him until now, and I'm glad I did, because the biopic's really good.
Yeah,
his films are really bad, but in a really good way, like an enjoyable way to like just watch bad cinema and bad like filmmaking, because like seeing the problems or like the weird techniques and whatnot, it's kind of admirable in a way. I really view Ed Wood as someone who, especially after the biopic, as someone who loved filmmaking and loved the idea of writing films, making films with his friends, and just not like giving a damn about the perception. Like, if you see the Ed Wood biopic, anytime his film premiered, people are throwing popcorn at the screen and booing. Everyone's in an uproar. That could be dramatic. I don't know. I wasn't there in the 50s. But he's got a smile on his face while everyone else is upset by the poor reception. Like, he just didn't care. He just loved the idea of making films so much that he just kept going and going. And then eventually turned to making like monster porn movies, which is very bizarre. And I don't know what compelled him to do that.
Watch one of those.
We should have. So yeah, he's kind of, in a way, can be considered an inspiration just to keep going, no matter like what people think of your work.
It was a very endearing story. Like, I kept saying that, like, he just was so earnest, or at least Johnny Depp's portrayal of him is such an earnest, like, this is what I want and I don't care. I love it and I want to keep doing it type of person.
Mm-hmm.
And having the heart not to tell someone like that, like almost like that's embodying a puppy dog. Like, you're just not good. Like, you shouldn't be doing this. But Dom, my girlfriend, also brought up a really good point. She's like, it's almost a fake it till you make it story. Like, the amount of people he got to invest in his movies and like somehow do this for a living, even though he clearly wasn't made for it, was impressive as shit.
Yep.
And
he rarely went to the same guy twice to get funding for his film. It was always somebody new or some new organization that like backed him.
He's just an interesting phenomenon. Like, And so he's significantly more likable than Tommy Wiseau, which makes it easier to get behind, like, being an Ed Wood fan. Like, I'm not really a Tommy Wiseau fan, because Tommy was, like, kind of an asshole. And
Isn't it? He was entitled.
yeah, and I don't know, maybe Johnny Depp's portrayal of Ed was a little bit more flattering than how he was in real life, because he did become an alcoholic and, like, slightly abusive.
Yep.
I know that the movie tries to portray him and his wife were, like, really happy till the end, but, like, I read somewhere that actually he died of a heart attack and she refused to come into the room because she was sick of his shit and thought he was just fucking with her or something. And then she came in later and he was dead. So,
well, the film ends before we even get to any of that part of his life. So it could have been, for what they portrayed, it could have been pretty accurate.
And granted, our opinions of these movies are heavily based on the biopic and not, like, research. So if you watch Ed Wood, it's in the eyes of someone who the lens is a empathetic lens or sympathetic lens to Ed Wood as a character, whereas Disaster Artist is kind of a sympathetic lens to Dave or whatever his name is, the friend of Tommy Wiseau.
The author of the book.
The author of the book, where Tommy's kind of the antagonist almost in that story. He's kind of an asshole, you know.
That book's fantastic, though.
You read it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's a blast.
Damn, I should read it. But I did think that this movie was probably my second favorite Tim Burton movie. I called it my favorite until I remembered Big Fish.
But agreed.
It's really well done storytelling. It feels like the world of Ed Wood just lends itself so well to Tim Burton's eye.
Yeah.
The black and white sort of nature, the darker tones, more, crushed blacks and really highlighted areas. And the actors he got to play some of the roles. Like, I don't even know who played Bela Lugosi, but it's almost just Bela Lugosi.
I know. I'm pretty sure that dude is, like, a pretty well-known actor, but I don't know him enough.
All I know now is that I never will stop saying the name Bela Lugosi. And I kind of want to do a Bela Lugosi month, like, and give him some credit where credit's due, because he was kind of the best part of the Ed Wood movies.
Yeah. And, the OG Dracula.
Yeah. It's so strange. I mean, maybe we can dive into that a little bit, but it's so strange that bad filmmakers tend to make really good biopics. Is that, like, we just, like...
Well, it's just because there's just kind of a, I don't know, enigmatic idea behind them. Like, what compels someone who's notoriously making terrible films to keep going, as well as even generate enough success to finish the damn thing, or even for the sake of Ed Wood, how he got so many investors to back him, like how he got a freaking, what was it, the Baptist Church organization to give him $60K to make Plan 9 from Outer Space, promising them that once that takes off and they make money from that, they'll make their religious movie. He'll make their religious movie.
How much do you think was actual luck and then skill? Because they have that scene in the film where he assumes that the leading lady, whose name is escaping me now, not Sarah Jessica Parker, but
Patricia Arquette.
No, not Patricia Arquette.
The other one.
The other actress
took over for Sarah Jessica Parker.
He assumes that she can pay $60,000.
Yeah.
And in the middle of shooting, she can't. She gave him everything he had. That's a clear fuck up.
Yeah.
So clearly he made mistakes, which means partially he must have gotten lucky. So how much was luck and how much was skill?
Yeah. The skill is just his salesmanship. The fact that he can just pitch these movies that, and even think of the names. Like, that scene where he's in front of the big time producer who shuts him down, and he just won't stop pitching just names. It's never like a plot. It's only the names. Like, he's like, The Bride of the Atom. He's like, what does that even mean? It's a sci-fi movie called The Bride of the Atom. It's like, okay. And he just then he throws out other names and other names and other names. And, like, the original Plan 9 from Outer Space is like Grave Robbers from Outer Space, which, what kind of concept is that? But he thought that these unique names for his movies would be enough to sell when he had no idea what to do. Like Glen or Glenda, he just told that producer who was trying to make a movie about sex change, he just told him that he could be the guy to do it because he's a cross-dresser. And then immediately he goes home and, like, bangs out a script in, like, maybe, like, 2 days or something. So it's like he agrees to these or comes up with these ideas only on a name basis and hardly a plot basis, and then just goes home and writes them out. Probably doesn't make any edits to it, and then there you have it. So he's the most rushed filmmaker, I think, of all time.
He may have been more successful as if he had decided not to be a director, writer, and producer, because actually his producing skills are impressive. Like you're saying, like he got a lot of people to give him money and invest in him and believe in him. But imagine if he was doing it for good films. Imagine if his job was just to find good films and like help find the funding and make the movie and make it big, instead of in charge of all of the different directions and rushing him. You're right. I think like the biggest problem of his filmmaking is the rushing.
The Russian?
The rushing. The rushing through it, though. So, like, not taking the proper amount of time in order to write out a story, not taking multiple takes, trying to film 25 takes in a night, and impressing people with that, but also sacrificing the quality.
Right.
You know?
I guess at the same time, though, when you think about some of the films, like, I think Bride of the Atom, which became Bride of the Monster, you think from the biopic when they're filming that, they're in a studio, a film studio, trying to do the 25 takes in a night, but they get kicked out of the studio. So, like, he's rushing to do this, mostly because he knows he can't be there, or, like, he can't afford to be there.
No, but he gets kicked out because they don't have the money, because that woman was supposed to give him the money, and she didn't have it, right? Wasn't that the...
I thought there was another time where they got kicked out because they actually, like, weren't supposed to be there, or something. Or, like, they didn't have... It was, like, after that. It was, like, another time they were filming, I thought, where, like, they were in the studio, and no one was there. And then someone, like a security guard, showed up or something, and like they don't have the money to pay for their time, and the guy's like, "Yeah, you got to get out of here." So they're trying. So it's like he's rushing to get it all done because he knows he can't afford to be where they are sometimes.
That's also that maybe I missed that part. I mean, it was already a week and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think also about, if we're talking about his just, it's not just the rushing through the process, but also just the story wise. Was there even a story to Glen or Glenda? I can't really. What was the story really?
Technically, the story was 2 stories. One of them was 10 minutes long. The other was about 50 minutes long, where the Glen or Glenda, which is Ed Wood playing Glen, and then his cross-dressing alter ego Glenda, and basically talking about why he chooses to do that and what it means. And then that other story that only lasted like 10 minutes towards the end was like, it had to do with that person was cross-dressing because of their mom always wanted a daughter, and it was some sort of like, upbringing that like shifted their view that would make them want to be like a crossdresser or something. But nevertheless, if you huge thick bushes that you have to push away, if you push through all the crap that's in that movie and you look to the core value of it, it's a very sympathetic like movie that's trying to give you like awareness and like respect for people who are like that, whether they have sex change operations, which is hardly touched on in the movie when it's supposed to be all about that, and he totally missed the mark on that, or about people who cross-dress, dressing like a woman, men who dress like women, which, for the 50s especially, is pretty profound. It's not the first time there's any sort of, queer themes in a movie. There's plenty well before it, but
really?
I think...
Do you know one?
There's a few Charlie Chaplin films that have it.
Really?
I don't remember the name of them, but I did a lot of research on it because I wanted to know like where this movie
kind of
lands
on the
history of LGBTQ. The funny thing though, and I feel like it's purposefully ignored because it's not a good movie. There is only, besides a Wikipedia article, there is only one article that I found that actually like mentions it in like the LGBTQ film timeline. Always gets ignored in all the other ones, and I feel like it's because it's not a good film, and they like maybe these people are only highlighting the good films that will show you like actually like generally good depictions or representations.
Which one is it? You're just leaving me in suspense.
The article?
No. What's the film that they leave out?
Glen or Glenda.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the one we're talking about.
I thought you were talking about a totally different film.
No,
You're like,
no.
there's one film that they leave out of the LGBTQ.
No, I said it's the one film that they leave out on the timeline. Like every other article, like shows the same films, and then it skips.
But not that one. I get it.
Yeah.
That's weird though, because I feel like the thing that made this movie endearing, which is really why I think the film Ed Wood is so nicely told through a sympathetic look for this filmmaker rather than like an asshole look, which again they could have done that. If we'll get into that in a second. What made the film Glen or Glenda at least feel endearing to me was that it felt like it was trying to not really, I don't want to say justify, but kind of explain someone who feels that way and how it's okay.
Yeah.
So essentially just trying to justify his feelings to an audience and say, like, this is why I am this way and this is why I want to stay this way. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that is a very human thing to feel. Like, you know.
Yeah.
And because Glenn, that's the one thing I took away from Glen and Glenda. Past all the weird shit.
You didn't like the steel mill stock?
The steel mill stock footage, the stock footage that repeats was really weird.
The Buffalo transition.
Besides the Buffalo transition, honestly, Bela Lugosi's still my favorite part of it all. I don't think Ed Wood's a good actor.
No.
But the endearing part is this is really him. He was a crossdresser, and so this film is really him pouring his heart out in film and hoping people accept him. That's what it felt like, and that again is an endearing thing. Like regardless if you're good or not, you can relate to that. It's like seeing a singer get up on stage who's so scared and terrified of doing it. It doesn't matter if they're good or bad. Like you just really kind of respect the pouring your soul out in that craft.
Yeah. And the biopic even sheds a little more light on that and the behind the scenes of that, because his girlfriend at the time, her name was it Dolores? Sarah Jessica Parker's character.
Oh, we can Google it. Oh wait, I don't have internet here. We can't Google it.
Well, never mind.
Oh,
so she is
if
a
you're
girlfriend
watching
at the
this,
time.
this is very anachronistic. We have iPhones and an old recording and a laptop.
Yeah, it's not really the 50s. But yeah, so she's his girlfriend at the time. She wants to be a big star, and the two of them are supposed to work together to bring each other to stardom. And then he gets the idea to make Glen or Glenda, and that's the first time that he admits to her, confesses to her that he's a cross-dresser, and she can't handle it. Meanwhile, she's playing
Dolores Fuller. You were right.
Oh yeah, Dolores Fuller.
And Kathy O'Hara
Is Patricia Arquette, or
yeah, Patricia Arquette is his other girlfriend.
So yeah, so Dolores is supposed to be eventually, towards the end of the movie, a sympathetic or empathetic, I should say, partner to Glen, and accepts that he is also Glenda and like wants to work with him and have that still be a part of his life and be by his side because she supports him and loves him. But that in reality doesn't happen with Dolores, and the reason why they break up is because one, she can't handle it, and two, the whole thing about making the investor like a star over her in the next film. I think that was Bride of the Monster. So it's just kind of sad when you see that he makes a movie that coincidentally stars him and his girlfriend at the time, and it leads to sort of an acceptance from his partner in the movie. Meanwhile, in reality, that's not the case.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that in the film Ed Wood, in the biopic, we have to specify, I think, that scene where she goes into the back room to read the script, and you see he's nervous, and she comes out, and he's in the dress. Mm-hmm. That's just the perfect example of like what you're saying, what the whole movie is, which is like this film, Glen or Glenda, is really just Ed Wood saying like what I want in my life and like being the most honest he can. And it's very hard to not compare this to something like Disaster Artist because, again, it's just the same type of film. It's about a filmmaker who was notoriously a really bad filmmaker. But the difference with the Disaster Artist is that Tommy Wiseau could never be honest with who he is as a person, like where he's from and how old he is, let alone what he wants and what his desires are. That he is by definition closed off and therefore not relatable because he chooses not to be relatable. Ed Wood, even if his actions are not relatable because, like, I don't wear women's clothing, the act of trying to open up and be honest with your loved ones and with people around you and just be accepted for who you are is very understandable.
Yeah.
And that's why I think Tim Burton and Johnny Depp did a real justice to the person, particularly with this film, because it's a lot like most of the Ed Wood film that starts out pretty much about Glen or Glenda. It does go into like a bunch of his other stuff. It ends with the
Plan 9.
Plan 9, yeah. But Glen or Glenda is the kickoff,
Mm-hmm.
which sets the tone of this again, like sympathetic look. And sympathetic because you feel bad that he's just a bad filmmaker. Empathetic because you can relate to a person who just wants to be himself.
Yeah.
Right? And I think they did a real justice to that guy. And like what you're saying, like that's the most redeemable quality about Glen or Glenda, regardless if it's a good movie or not. Like the backstory is what makes that movie better.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. Like, I've watched it twice. I didn't expect to watch it twice, but but it truly
I cannot
is,
believe you watched it twice with me.
It truly is, like, from a general standpoint, like, there are worst movies. Like, I could probably watch it multiple times, just mainly because it's like an hour, 15 minutes. But there are movies I've seen that are technically much worse on a general, like, I don't even know. Like, they're just so bad you can't watch it. So this falls in their lineup. It is actually really bad, but you can watch it. Like,
yeah, but you know, you pointed out something when we were watching it, and I agree. Is it bad technically or is it bad narratively? I feel like actually the
kind of both.
Yeah, kind of. All right. Yeah, no. It's definitely both. You're right. It's definitely both. But I feel like knowing the backstory behind it, what we are talking about, makes the narrative more understandable.
Well, like I said, like ripping away all the branches of like a thick bush to finally get to like the source of like this movie is what you need to do, and knowing the backstory is what helps you get there.
Documentary of his life. That's what I mean. Like this film, the story is his story, and if you know that, then it's actually you can look past that the narrative is not that good, because then you can see this as like, oh, this is just him opening up, and like I can enjoy that because like this is just a person, and it's he's telling his story. Exactly what we're saying. I'm repeating myself. It's the thing that would make me not want to rewatch it was the technical aspects of it. Like you mentioned when we were watching it, the sound popping.
Yeah, the
so sound
annoying.
cuts are so bad. Reminds me of this podcast sometimes.
We might do that for you in the editing.
But he's serious. It was terrible. It was and it was genuinely distracting. So I feel like a lot of the things that made his movies worse, and probably like scale past for me the story, because I can enjoy a low budget sci-fi. Don't get me wrong. Like Planet 9, what Plan 9? Plan 9, not Planet 9. Plan 9.
Formerly known as Grave Robbers from Outer Space.
I could watch that. Sounds awesome, But it's the technical shit that kind of got to me. Like all the stock B-roll.
Yeah,
like repeating it is just stupid. Nobody wants to see that twice in a movie. That's
right.
The whole point, right?
Which did become his like sort of claim to fame in a way, is like he would take just any stock footage that he could find and just throw it into his movie when like he had to fill voids. Like what we were just talking about before with the steel mill conversation. There is a total like shift in the narrative halfway through Glen or Glenda, where two people who work at like some sort of like factory or steel mill are talking about someone being a cross-dresser, but it's just voiceover while you're watching stock footage of a machine like melting and like compressing steel. So
Brian's got a great theory on that scene.
I do.
Yeah.
Oh, of the characters.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was actually about to get into that. Yeah. So one thing I noticed upon my second rewatch, why I gotta watch movies twice, is when one guy's talking, you see the giant machine like doing the compressing, like flattening the steel, whatever. And when the other guy talks, it's the molten, like I don't even know the right words for it because I don't work in the mills.
Metal.
Yeah,
liquid,
yes.
liquid.
Liquid.
It's the melted metal.
Melted metal, yeah, coming out of the machine. Whenever that shows up, the other guy's talking. So you're literally watching a conversation between a giant machine and its product, going back and forth talking about people cross-dressing.
So Brian thinks that the machines were actually supposed to be the voices, which I kind of think is hilarious.
Yeah.
But cutting back to the same stock footage of the kids in the every time in the playground was just ridiculous.
Yeah, and using the same voiceovers too sometimes. Like in the beginning, where they're talking about the concept of sex change operations and cross dressing, and like there's that horrible woman with the high pitched voice being like, "Well, the creator wanted me to be a woman, then that's what I'm gonna be." That plays twice within 2 minutes.
Yeah,
And
no, I
then,
think she says something along the lines of like, if the creator wanted us to fly, he would have
oh yeah,
given
that's
us
what it was.
wings.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And then like the farmer dude saying like, if the creator wanted us to, what is it?
To drive,
We'd have us wheels. And like it also shows stock footage of a farmer, and he's like chewing on like wheat, and I think he was trying to make it look like that was the guy talking, and it very clearly doesn't line up.
No, it was. I don't know if I agree with that assessment that it was supposed to be the guy talking, but I just think, in part because Ed Wood had to get out of these like studios quickly, and he was shooting things so quickly that he would just take things off the cutting room floor, like just take things that people didn't want and piece them into his movies or build movies around them. Is it bad to say that part of that reminds me of how we were when we were 21 making movies? Because part of us were like, we didn't give a shit.
But we didn't use stock footage.
No, but there were things where we were like, it's fine. We'll be like for instance, not at that degree, not at that severity. No, not at that severity. I understand what you mean. But like we were like, well, we don't need lights, or we'll just use this. Like there's part of
that's true.
Part of it as a biopic and as a filmmaker, it was relatable. It was relatable to the people who decided we're just going to do it differently because, like, why do you have to do it complicated? It just turned out that he wasn't that good. But that's not uncommon in fantastic filmmakers too. I mean, look at Robert Rodriguez. Robert Rodriguez made movies with 2 VHS players to edit and post-recorded everything. Didn't give a shit if the dub lined up at all. He would just have people record stuff. And filmed with no crew at all. And made a movie all by himself that was like, wrote on Post-it notes.
That El Mariachi?
Yeah. Like he did all that. Like totally against what the rules of Hollywood are. And it was a huge success.
Yeah.
So there's something insane about what Ed Wood did, but also something very relatable in terms of every other filmmaker. Trying to find the new way to do something and not necessarily get bogged down by all the rules to follow, because if you do, it's overwhelming as shit,
Especially when you have no budget. Like, he was able to secure, like, a couple, like, 10 or so grand to, like, make a movie, but when you're in the film business, you realize how little that actually gets you on a technical standpoint.
Yeah, it goes quick.
It goes quick. So, like, $60,000 sounds insane, but like I don't even know like what he needed it for, like like what it was even going to, and he was like running low on his funds. But yeah, it shows that he didn't have the budget that he wanted to make what he wanted to make.
No, and it's weird. I mean, I found myself watching Ed Wood and sometimes hearing him say shit that I've said almost verbatim, like, no, we don't need more takes. Let's move on. It's fine. Or, I could build a movie around the stock footage alone. Like, something else that he said that, like, really got me where I was like, oh, shit, that's almost exactly something I said. Oh, yeah, no, it was money related. Exactly what you're talking about, which was, like, I used to bitch about, like, how in Hollywood, I think they use too much money, and then in Holland they have so much less money. I'm like, so they're just wasting money. Like, it was just like, we could do this for 50 grand. And I still might hold some of those opinions, but it was weird to see those opinions held by a notoriously terrible filmmaker.
Yeah.
At first it freaked me out and was like, maybe I'm a terrible filmmaker, folks. But I think
let us know.
Yeah, let us know, please. But I do think part of me has come away realizing that that's another reason this film is so relatable for any filmmaker. My favorite scene in there is when he meets Orson Welles, which I'm not sure if actually ever happened.
Part of me feels like that was dramatized.
Dramatized, yeah.
Dramatized.
Yeah, I don't think that actually happened, but I do think like the point of that scene, if we're going to break down a scene from the film, I think the point of that scene is to show that at the top of the top versus the bottom of the bottom, the struggle's the same and the love is the same. Like, that's how I would have read that. And I almost would want to rewatch that scene and really break it down and analyze it with you. But I think that's where that's coming from.
Yeah, I agree.
You know? Because Orson Welles was arguably the best of the best at the time, and Ed Wood was
Ed Welles. It was Ed Wood's idol.
Yeah.
He kept saying he wanted to be like Orson Welles.
And Ed Wood was notoriously the worst of the worst.
He was the Ed Wood of the time.
And yet at the same, they can both have this sort of... I won't say Orson had admiration for him, because obviously Wood had the admiration for Orson in that scene, but there was a mutual respect. They could talk to each other like people and like filmmakers. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, maybe Orson Welles' opinion of Ed Wood would have changed if he had seen his movies, but you could also argue that he wasn't a known filmmaker, right? So if you meet like a famous person and you say, "Oh, I'm a filmmaker," then normally the next question is, "Oh, what have you done? Have I seen anything you've done?" And if you haven't, then they kind of use that as a way to, I don't know, rate the degrees at which you're separated in the industry.
Yep.
But it doesn't seem like the scene read that way. Like, it didn't seem like Orson took him any less seriously because he said he was a filmmaker. Because it takes one to know one, sort of thing. And I really thought that was cool. Like,
it was cool.
It means that you can still, even if as a bad filmmaker, learn a lot from Ed Wood as a filmmaker, and really respect his drive and passion for all that stuff.
Yeah, agreed. One comparison I did want to make about Ed Wood. So it's a weird, it's a good comparison in my opinion, the one that I came up with and I'm about to share. But it's also like not like that paralleled, because one person I'm comparing him to is generally speaking like was good at what they did in some respects. So I view like Ed Wood is to filmmaking as Daniel Johnston is to music. Do you know Daniel Johnston?
No, who's that?
He was like a singer-songwriter between like I think like the late 80s to like the 2000s. He passed away like a few years ago. And what he was known for, he's kind of technically like considered an originator of like lo-fi music, because all he would do, he would record just songs in his room, poorly recorded because he's recording them off like a cassette player. Like you can hear him like hit the keys on a keyboard, like like that sound that like if you like turn the sound volume off on a keyboard,
weird like thud.
Yeah, you can hear that when he's hitting the chords. You can so it's very lo-fi, like poorly produced music, and generally speaking, from like a production standpoint, it's not good. However, he's also was a very good songwriter,
a lyricist.
Yeah, he had a lot of good songs that like just had like really deep or like powerful, relatable lyrics to them. But he's generally, from a technical standpoint, he's not a very good musician. Like overall, like anyone can kind of agree with that. But his charm is what made people like him, as well as his songwriting. And he was just someone who did it like Ed Wood, wanted to make films because he loved making films. Daniel Johnston, not the best singer, maybe not the best musician, but loved making music and continued to make music no matter what. Like one of his, I think it was like his third album, it was a cassette, Hi, How Are You? He was working at McDonald's. And he would just give them out to people in the drive-thru, like, "Hi, I'm Daniel Johnston. Here's my album. I hope you like it." And that's how he got his music out. He just
crazy.
Working at McDonald's in the drive-thru, just giving them out to customers, like as a thank you for going to McDonald's, I guess. And then he got very popular mostly because Kurt Cobain liked his music, and like the VMAs. I
know this guy had mental illnesses too.
He did, yeah. He was bipolar.
Yeah, I remember this guy. Yeah, yeah. No, I've heard of some of his music. You know who really likes him? Tom Richards.
I can see that. Yeah, I like his music too. It's very good. But if you know his music and just know his artistry, like I feel like people can agree with that comparison. These are two people who technically weren't the best at what they did and didn't fully know what they were doing compared to like more professional people, but did it because they loved to do it and didn't really care what people thought. They just wanted to keep doing it and doing it for the passion and the love. And both those guys are just two admirable people, no matter what the quality of their work is, because like it's inspiration to just keep doing what you love doing, no matter what. Like don't let negativity get you down. Just let your passion override what everyone else is saying. It could work out in the end.
Absolutely right. And the end of Ed Wood, you really feel that. Like, he's in the theater watching what he loves. I think the filmmakers that I like, or the actors that I like, tend to be the ones that are like that. It's the difference between a celebrity and passion for the craft, for the art.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that everything has to be artistic. Like, look, I love a good blockbuster film, and that also can be very artistic. I'm not saying that only art house film should be the thing that's out there, but the way I feel about these things, and I've thought about this before too, is like, regardless of how my life would ever turn out, this is all I would ever want to do, is just make things. I love making things. I love the process, and everything else is kind of secondary. I just need to eat and have a place to live, and I don't care. I just want to do like creative, fun stuff like this. That's what's so endearing about Ed Wood, is just someone who just wants to do that. And the Johnny Depp movie is exactly what you just said. Somebody who they have to do it. That's what they need in their life. And it was unfortunate that he wasn't very good at it, but the redeeming quality in his films is that his passion is so strong, and you can feel that passion is so strong that that filmmakers can relate to him. That's why I think he's a cult hero now, or like,
he did. He became a cult sort of
icon
after 2 years after his death, when he received, and he died in 1978. In 1980, received a Golden Turkey Award for the worst director of all time. And that made people interested and be like, well, what made this guy the worst director of all time? So then his movies that must have been shelved in some capacity got kind of like re-released and like resurfaced. And then, people in a way appreciate them. Like they got popular after that time. And you can watch all of them right now on today's sponsor, Pluto TV, or YouTube. Like, you search them and you can just watch them.
I feel like the film does show a slightly biased portion of his life where he's still in that passionate phase, and I would say that when I read about his later years doing like porn and dying of alcoholism and a heart attack and being homeless almost and living from couch to couch, I kind of would wish to like research a little bit more of that.
Yeah, there's a documentary on him.
Yeah, there is. Maybe it's kind of cool to watch that. I feel like
I think his past, like his girlfriends, are, at least one of them is in it.
Really?
Yeah.
I think the thing that's really interesting is that from the perspective of the biopic and from what we've been talking about in this podcast, you would be quick to believe that that was a result of his failed career, and like how his passion, just no one ever really gave him, people gave him chances, but he never really impressed anybody, I'd say. And so it's really easy to say like, well, he was an alcoholic and it wasn't his fault. He was homeless and it wasn't his fault. He had to go into porn or he wouldn't be able to survive, type of thing. But I'm curious to like see where the passion started to die out, and when the necessity for living and like the depression kind of kicked in.
I did wonder that. Did he shift to monster porn because he knew that, maybe he's better suited for that? Like, he can actually like make a decent buck.
I think that like there were freaks out there that he could sell that to much easier. That porn theaters in like the 70s, probably way easier.
Exactly. If someone's horny, they're not going to care what they're watching as long as the stuff they want to see is going on.
The sexual liberation of the 60s and 70s probably lended itself well to him making money in the business, but in the more seedy area.
Yeah.
I would say the reason I'd want to see something on that is because he's depicted as such a hopeful, passionate person in the film, like just so bright-eyed and like always, like he got down, but he never stopped trying because that's all he wanted. And like the end of the movie after his talk with Orson is like that. He comes in, he's like, we're doing my movie my way because this is what I want, and I'm the director, essentially. And so I want to see, this is really morbid, so I apologize to our viewers, but I would almost want to see like the death of that passion, because it seems like if you read about his life, that had to have died. Like he eventually fell into alcoholism because he couldn't make his passion work, and he ended up having a sad life, dying pretty much alone because his wife didn't even want to walk into the room to see him at the time, which is crazy. There's something so sad about seeing that passion just like be stripped from the eyes, that light taken away. But to your point, I think even up until the end, he maintained some of it. He never let any of it really get him down, because even when he succumbed to something as low as the porn industry as a director, he maintained monster porn.
Yeah, sci-fi porn house.
Yeah, that's funny to say, but it's really true. Like, he didn't let go of the thing that interested him. He didn't just make fucking like porn films. His porn films were like, I'm gonna do the porn films, but like I'm putting my octopus in there. You know?
And we're getting the animatronic one that I couldn't get for that other movie.
Yeah, I'm putting the octopus in there, and yeah, people are still gonna have to deal with the stuff that I want to make, but I'll just put some, sex and dicks and vaginas in there for you.
Sex and dicks and vaginas.
Like, he even to the end tried. Sorry guys, my phone went off. I usually turn it off.
How very Ed Wood of you.
Yeah, whoops, my bad. Even till the end, that's like it. The passion faded, but it never fully went away, and I think that would make a really interesting movie.
I agree. I will say, I think someone like Ed Wood deserves a bit of a, if he hasn't had it already. I just don't know a lot of people who watch his films and are aware of him, besides my dad. Hey, Dad. Thanks for the suggestion. But he's someone who I think deserves a legacy for what he did, for being the worst director of all time. And truly, I would argue, based on watching 3 of his movies, no one has beaten him at that in terms of just the weird stock footage, the horrible audio.
Dude, Tommy Wiseau got close. If you ever watch The Room,
I have watched The Room.
I mean, everybody knows that. Everybody knows that.
It's just like awkwardly bad. These are just like, from a narrative perspective, it's all over the place. These films are all over the place. Tommy Wiseau is just like, he has no idea what he's doing. At least Ed Wood kind of had an idea what he's doing. He just wasn't very good at doing that sound.
Yeah, it's a totally different person. Like,
yeah.
Tommy Wiseau did things because he thought he needed to do them. At least how the Disaster Artist depicts it.
The fucking 2-minute sex scene.
Yeah, like he did things because, like, that's how you do it in Hollywood. But he clearly had no idea because he never worked in it. He built a fucking stage that looked like the outside. Like, that's the idea there. He used green screens when you don't need them because he's like, that's what they use in the movies, right? Sorry for the terrible impression. Ed Wood was a totally different type of director and a totally different type of salesman, because he was also someone that, like, seemed to know what he was doing in some capacity.
He knew what he needed to get it done.
He knew what he needed, and he knew, like, how to technically make a film. Like, he knew the editing portion, he knew the lighting department, he had all that stuff. He didn't, like, waste sets. In fact, he was the opposite. Tommy Wiseau threw millions of dollars into something that didn't need it. Yep. And Ed Wood was like, I'm going to do this all on a budget, as much as I can.
He could make it work if he needed to.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off.
But that's what I mean, though. Like, how he did this, whether they're horrible films or not, like, I think it's still something that, like, he should be taught in a film school. I truly believe that Glen or Glenda should be shown in, like, any sort of, like, editing sort of film class about, like, how to not edit a film, because, like, it's the perfect example of why, like, it's just what bad editing is and how to avoid it, basically. I just because, like, it literally shows you, I would argue, everything that you shouldn't do to properly edit a film. And I feel like that's something worth, rather than just saying it, why wouldn't you show it? It's only an hour and 15 minutes. Like, that's a class. That is a class right there.
That is a worth watching sort of class. You're totally right. Some character that I think was a little bit underrated, or not underrated, wrong word. Not featured or focused enough was Bill Murray's character, actually. I kind of liked the whole subplot about him trying to get his sex change in Mexico. It was...
The only reason why I did think he wasn't shown that often is because he only had a role in Plan 9. Like, that's literally that's actually his only, like, film credit.
Ever.
That one character in Plan 9.
It's
but
strange.
He was a good friend, obviously, and a good support system for Ed Wood.
It's strange. There's 2 levels to this film, because Ed Wood came out in 94, and in the 90s did have this sort of, like, progressive tone that kind of, like, weighed through them. Mm-hmm. I've talked with my roommate a lot about this. Like, it's a little bit forgotten because as soon as, like, 2000s hit, we, like, dipped back down into, like, more of a conservative country. But the 90s was a pretty, like, progressive time. So this film makes a lot of sense to come out in the 90s to talk about transgenderism and cross-dressing and acceptance for LGBTQ, like that makes more sense. Because again, that was a thing that was like, I mean, Boys Don't Cry was like one of the biggest movies of the 90s. And Pedro Almodovar won the Oscar in the 90s for All About My Mother. Like that was definitely a type of thing that was being talked about more in the 90s. And that means that the film, I won't give the film credit for being like ahead of its time in the 90s, even though I think some people will. But I will give Ed Wood and his friends and Glen or Glenda massive credit for being the people they wanted to be in the 50s, because that's fucking wild to me. That is crazy.
That was, I can't remember for the life of me the name of the act, but that was during the beginning stages, I think, of that whatever Hollywood act that came out that like had strict guidelines on what you can and can't show and film, and that which got abolished, I think, in like '68 or something like that.
It got abolished close by. I think the Midnight Cowboy came out. If you've ever seen that,
I have.
John Voight, Dustin Hoffman. It's fantastic. The air conditioning just came on.
No, that's a train.
Oh,
we're
that was
near
a train
station.
Sorry. What was I gonna say? I think that when I look back at it now, we were just talking about the whole porn. Maybe he didn't go in there just for the money. He may have actually gone in there because of the censorship. I don't know when his porns were made, because
I think it was like late 60s to 70s. Yeah, I think he was making them until his death.
When did he die?
78.
78? It could have been also a sort of like, I'm not going to be censored type of thing. Because he doesn't seem like the type of person that would want to be censored. So he used porn as a way to get out a message, because it was the only place where he could still put that message without censorship. Kind of like the plot of Nice Guys.
Yeah, that's what a tie-in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, might be. I don't know. It's worth doing further
I like your
research.
car, big boy.
I'm sorry you look Puerto Rican. What does he say at the end? No, he says, I'm sorry you look Filipino or something. Because he makes the Russell Crowe in the ad. Looks
Oh,
a
yeah.
little
He does look Filipino.
Oh, my God. All right, should we get out of here and play some b-ball?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. Peace out, dudes.
Thank you
Bye.
for watching, listening, whatever. Watch Ed Wood.